Doctor, please, you gotta help me. I feel depressed. Life seems harsh and cruel. Winning feels empty, but losing feels worse, and it's like I'm all alone in a threatening world. Ah, I see. Well, the treatment is simple. Just simply go home and watch Ping Pong the animation. That should pick you right back up. But doctor, I am... Wait, did I stutter? Not every joke lands, not every video takes off, and your art isn't always going to meet your expectations. It looks different for everybody, but we all deal with failure. And when it does happen, you can either accept it mindfully, or you can beat yourself up with some kind of iron forges iron mentality. That's the takeaway from one of the first videos that I made for YouTube about the importance of being nice to yourself when things don't go as planned. In some ways, this video is going to be a follow-up to that one, so maybe go watch it or something. I don't know, I'm not the boss of you. Self-compassion kicks in when things have already gone wrong. The results are already known, and it's not what you were looking forward to. And in those situations, being self-compassionate can help you avoid internalizing negativity and bounce back more quickly than you might have otherwise. But there's a complementary piece that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I want to focus on here. And that's the importance of making sure that you are having fun with whatever it is you're doing, regardless of what the outcome is. Relatively recently, Nage, a Guilty Gear player that I've followed for, oh boy, the better part of a decade now, published an update to a blog that he initially shared back in 2015, the title of which roughly translating to When My Heart Was Broken. Despite being a longtime fan of the franchise, I never really tried to get good at Guilty Gear until the release of Guilty Gear Xrd. Part of that process meant setting time aside to watch other players' matches and try to imitate what it is they were doing. In particular, I set a lot of time aside to watch Jonio-san's broadcast from Mikado Game Center, where many of the best players in Japan, and subsequently the world, would meet to play. Since Mikado is a brick-and-mortar arcade, there was a recurring cast of regular players who would show up on those broadcasts, one of which being Nage. And there are some players who, through a combination of their own skill and propensity for picking one color, become so closely associated with it that it becomes theirs, like FAB in playing Red Potemkin or Nage's own Pink Faust. There were mornings where I would tune in and I would see a Pink Faust player win for maybe an hour before losing a single game, and I wouldn't even have to look at a player's name to know who it was. Guilty Gear is an expressive game, and as you get better at it, you start being able to get an idea of what's going through a player's mind, or even what kind of mood they're in while they're playing. And whenever I would watch Nage play, I always walked away with the impression that he was having fun above all. Not surprisingly, in his own writing, he said that his most important mantra as a player is, keep having fun. Beyond his skill in the game, Nage also sits at a rare intersection of players who are both very good in the game and also very good at expressing their thought process. So imagine my surprise when I found this blog titled When My Heart Was Broken, authored by this player that I see not only winning, but clearly having fun while doing it. And I strongly recommend giving the whole thing a read, even if you have no interest in Guilty Gear. I'm going to put a link to it down there in the video description, so just go click on that when you have some time. To briefly summarize, well before I was interested in fighting games, Nage had qualified for Togeki, a Japanese national tournament, and had set his sights on winning the championship without losing a single game. He was chasing the fabled 100% win rate. However, the combination of being unable to win consistently, an awareness that there were stronger players than him out there, and the desire to not disappoint his teammates in Togeki led him to burnout. He found himself both unable to step away from the game, but also no longer enjoying playing it. Winning brought him no joy, but losses devastated his confidence. He found himself unable to adjust to other players or try new strategies, while also being unable to take advice. So let's take a second here and unpack, because that goal, winning a specific tournament without losing a single game, is not particularly great for a number of reasons. For starters, it is entirely outcome focused. It is completely black and white, and outside of winning, nothing else matters. Even beyond that, it's not just about winning, it's about winning flawlessly, perfectly, and anything else beyond that is a failure. And second, it's also impossible. No matter what you are doing, art, music, academics, sports, YouTube, failure is unavoidable. Trying new things, experimenting, and failing is a necessary step for growth. So when you take these two things together, focusing only on an outcome, and also setting up an impossible goal, you have a recipe for disaster, burnout, and stifled growth. Now, obviously, Nage found a way to enjoy himself again, or else there wouldn't be much to write about here. In writing about his own process towards developing a healthier mindset, one of the factors that he cites is taking time to make sure that he is still having fun, even placing that over and above everything else. And if he finds himself in a position where he's not enjoying himself anymore, he goes and does something else until he's able to come back to the game and enjoy it again. Centering his enjoyment over things like whether or not he's able to maintain a specific win rate helped him to not only recover from burnout, but become a stronger player. The player that I admired watching these streams from my tiny apartment somewhere across the world. Now, you might be thinking that this seems really obvious, and in hindsight, maybe it is. Of course, you should stop and make sure that you're actually enjoying doing something. However, when I first read this post, I was in a similar spot, both in my hobbies and, way more importantly, in my doctoral work. I had developed an outcome-focused mindset where I held myself up to an impossible standard. Whether it was submitting grants for research or mashing rematch well after I knew I wasn't having fun anymore, if success was possible, then I felt that I should succeed, even obligated to succeed. And anything else wasn't good enough. With everything that I've already said, would you be surprised if I told you that I burned out? Well, probably not, and I did. After I got my first wave of manuscript rejections, I spent months doing the absolute bare minimum and just coasting in my program. I even considered quitting for a period of time. What pulled me back from the brink was realizing that I was still having fun with the process, even if I wasn't getting the outcomes that I wanted. And shifting my priorities to value that enjoyment more heavily helped me to turn things around. And it was while going through this process myself that I first found that blog post, and it surprised me. I guess the kids say that it hit different. Seeing this player that seemed invincible to me, who seemed to always be having fun, talking about having gone through a comparable process himself. Regardless of whether or not it is or isn't in your control, failure is unavoidable in real life. However, it's not as common to see it reflected that way in sports media. And that makes sense, right? People love to see an underdog win. Whether it's an injury, an important loss, or some other kind of setback, failure is typically shown as more of a temporary setback that ends up turning into motivation for the protagonist as they move into the climax of the story. It's a pit stop instead of something that's seriously considered. With that in mind, there are two series that I want to talk about now that do an excellent job of depicting the inevitability of failure and the importance of being able to make meaning for yourself irrespective of outcomes. So, spoiler warning for Ping Pong the animation and Umamusume Pretty Derby. Yes, the show about the horse girls. You've already trusted me for about 10 minutes, so just sit tight. It's hard to say enough about Ping Pong. The original run of the series wrapped in 1997, with an animation adaptation debuting in 2014, nearly 20 years later. And during that time, no series has done it better. If you aren't familiar with Ping Pong as a series, once you become more familiar with it, it's clear to see the extent of its impact on sports manga. Even if you, like me, don't know the first thing about Ping Pong, don't worry. The series focuses more on the psychology of its 5 central characters than the rules of the game. Even the games themselves typically dissolve into beautiful, abstract, even impressionist sequences that play out more like kaiju battles than table tennis. The core of the series is built around 5 characters as they each deal with their own personal competitive demons. You have Smile, a robotic player who lacks the drive and ruthlessness to win despite his immense talent. His childhood friend Peko, a self-assured childhood champion who has allowed his past success to go to his head. Shakuma, a childhood rival of Peko and Smile, who's pushing himself to the brink in an effort to overcome his lack of talent. Kong, a former member of the Chinese national team who after losing his spot has been hired by a Japanese high school to serve as both a player and a coach. And finally, Kazuma, a national ace who finds himself both unable to enjoy the game and also unable to walk away because of the expectations placed on him by other people. There's so much here that there's almost undoubtedly going to be a full video on ping pong at some point. So for now, I just want to focus on 3 characters and how their arcs illustrate the importance of enjoying the game over and above winning. So let's talk about Peko, Kazuma, and my personal favorite character, Shakuma. At the start of the series, each of these characters has a focus exclusively on winning, but for very different reasons. So let's take a cue from the series and start with a focus on Peko. Peko starts off as a self-assured character that has correctly guessed that he is the protagonist of the story. As a child, he played ping pong at the same hall as Smile and Shakuma, but was far and away the most successful of them, racking up numerous wins and youth trophies. As the series picks up now in high school, Peko is part of his school's ping pong team, but he blows off his teammates with the sole exception of Smile. He's abrasive, cocky, and in his mind, an unbeatable hero. However, in his hubris, he hasn't realized that Smile has been throwing games to him for some time. And it's something that all of the other capable players in the series quickly realize, further highlighting how out of touch Peko has become. Further cementing his immaturity as a competitor, we find out that Peko also has a lingering tendency to cry when he loses. As the story picks up, Peko takes a series of humiliating losses, first from Kong, who he sought out thinking that this former Chinese national player would be an easy win for him, and then to Shakuma, who we learn Peko has been ribbing and looking down on as a player since the time that they were children. With his self-image as an invincible player shredded, Peko quits. Because at the start of the series, the only thing that matters to him is winning. He needs to win to maintain his own ego. Whether or not he actually enjoys playing doesn't factor into his outlook anymore. It's only later in the story that Peko is able to face his own losses, relearn the game of ping pong from the ground up, and rediscover why he loved this game in the first place. In accepting the necessity of failure, he finally is able to become the hero that he had so loudly declared himself to be. Peko's story is at the heart of what makes ping pong such a special show and one that I recommend so highly. It's a series that earnestly asks the question, why are you competing in the first place? And then follows each of these characters as they come up with their own answer to that question. Like Peko, Shakuma starts off as a player that strives to win without any concern for whether or not he actually wants to be there. But unlike Peko, instead of playing for the sake of maintaining his self-image, Shakuma is playing to try to win acknowledgement from people that he admires. He is wholly committed to ping pong, having made deep sacrifices in his life to become a starter on his school's team. But despite all of his effort, there is an X factor that he simply does not have. The outcome that he's been searching for, to become a strong player so that other people will acknowledge him, is simply not possible for him. He's shaved his head and geared everything about himself toward success at ping pong, only to realize that the door to success was never open to him in the first place. And in his first appearance, he comes off as cocky, short-tempered, argumentative, all because he simply doesn't enjoy this game. When he's finally asked that all-important question, why are you even competing? His answer is to walk away. Shakuma's arc closely mirrors that of his idol Kazuma. Kazuma's family makes ping pong gear and uses his success as a marketing tool. His team looks to him as their unstoppable ace. For him, victory isn't just expected, it's an obligation. An obligation that is crushing him as a person. He feels no joy from victory, and after all, how could he? How could he celebrate something when in his own mind, he's still just doing the bare minimum? Like Shakuma and Peko, Kazuma is focused solely on outcomes, but unlike Peko and Shakuma, he simply can't walk away, leaving him to resent a game that he used to enjoy. He's reached the top of the mountain and found only loneliness there waiting for him. To help deal with his situation, Kazuma has developed a pre-game ritual where he goes and locks himself in a bathroom stall just before every game, not unlike the devil in the classic Twilight Zone episode, The Howling Man. To him, being alone in the dark is less isolating than being out there adored for his skill in a game that he doesn't enjoy. Even though his coaches and teammates all know that he does this, none of them can seem to get their heads around why. That is, until Shakuma comes at the end of the series to spectate a game, and hearing that Kazuma has locked himself up in the bathroom, goes to confront him. His time away has given him perspective, and Shakuma is now more confident, composed, and has a full head of hair. Walking away from a game that was making him miserable was clearly the right decision for him. Finally understanding Kazuma's pre-game ritual, Shakuma has one question for his old idol. Who are you playing for? And when Kazuma tells him that he plays for himself, Shakuma calls him a liar. He knows that Kazuma doesn't actually want to be there. He's not playing for himself, he's playing because of the weight of the expectations put on him. When you sort the world into a collection of winners and losers, things start to get very bleak very quickly. Pivoting to the real world, this is a 16-player bracket. Maybe you've seen one before, and maybe you've even played in one before. The thing is, 15 people in this bracket are going to finish in a position other than first place. Sorry for the spoiler there. And if you are the kind of person that only values outcomes and can only think that your participation is worthwhile in retrospect if you win, then the odds are not in your favor. And this applies to more than just competition. Maybe you're sketching something and you think that maybe your time was only well spent if when you ultimately share it, you get a certain number of likes. This mindset of prioritizing outcomes above all else runs through ping pong just as it runs through real life. As Tamura Obaba says in ping pong, the winners write history and the losers are history. I've seen that mindset wreck a lot of people. Failure happens, and it's guaranteed to happen as long as you're putting in effort. Focusing on outcomes in a world where failures and setbacks are inevitable is ultimately self-destructive. It is essential to be able to find value in the act of doing regardless of what the outcome is. And if you can't do that, you're on the fast track to burnout. Ping Pong's willingness to place the spotlight not on the characters' successes, but on how they respond to failure, makes the series almost uncomfortably close to life if you have any history with competition. It leans into a reality that is unavoidable but rarely talked about in sports media, and in the nearly 25 years since the conclusion of the manga and 10 since the adaptation, nothing has done it better. But there is one show that comes close, and it's the one about horses. Gosh, where do I even start with Umamusume? This is a fever dream of a franchise, and I'm gonna own that this is gonna seem like a hard tonal pivot, but stick with me for a bit here. In the world of Umamusume, horse girls inherit the names and spirits of horses from another world, aka our world. They're also all girls, regardless of what the horse's sex was in our world. Also, horses as we know them don't exist, and the series uses a special font just so that the kanji for horse only has 2 legs. The stories of each of the characters closely follows the real-life events of the horses they're named after. It's also pretty gay, so it might be easier to think about this as Trans-Sapphic Horse Valhalla. There are currently 2 seasons of the anime adaptation of Umamusume with a 3rd on the way, but I only want to talk about the 2nd one here. And I put it up there on my personal list, not just with shows like Ping Pong, but even movies like Raging Bull, the first Rocky for very sincere reasons, and Rocky IV, the one where Rocky ends the Cold War for very different reasons. In the 2nd season of Umamusume, we follow Tokai Teo, who was introduced as a side character in the 1st season. At the start of the story, Teo is on the verge of accomplishing her lofty goal of winning the Triple Crown while remaining undefeated. It's something that no horse has been able to do since Teo's idol and real-life sire, Sambali Rudolph, accomplished it years ago. Everything seems good until the winning live. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that the winner circle is an idol concert. Did I mention the series is a fever dream? Anyway, during the concert, Teo's leg noticeably buckles. Despite her attempts to hide it, she's injured herself closing out the second of the 3 races forming the Triple Crown. Just like real-world horses, leg injuries in Umamusume are usually career-ending, if not life-ending. Tokai Teo is undoubtedly a legendary horse, but not for winning. Teo's story starts at the precipice of an athlete in decline. As with ping pong, this isn't a story about triumph. This is a story about learning to enjoy process for its own sake. As the story goes on, we follow Teo through recovery, ill-advised comebacks, and re-injury. It's early into her rehabilitation that we get a glimpse of a corkboard in her bedroom with the goal, undefeated Triple Crown, printed on it. When she's unable to recover in time for the 3rd race, we see the corkboard again with the word Triple Crown crossed out. These races are once-in-a-career chances. Even if she does recover and complete that 3rd race in another year, the Triple Crown is forever out of her reach. However, she can still remain undefeated. That is until an ill-advised comeback hands her the worst finish of her career. She can't win the Triple Crown, and she can never go back to being undefeated. And so the series pivots to asking the question, what do you do when the goal you've been chasing is forever out of reach? Along the way, the series segues into a subplot following the horse Rice Shower, another horse who is dealing with factors outside of her control. Against expectations, she's overperformed and upset favorites in other races and prevented them from breaking their own records. To the crowd, Rice Shower is a villain, a spoiler, and a heel. She's booed by spectators even though her main motivation for racing in the first place is to be cheered for. Like Teo, the goal that she's been chasing is closed off to her, leaving her to reevaluate whether she even enjoys racing apart from chasing the adoration of an audience. In ping pong, victory is uncertain. The characters each have their own arc of accepting that they need to be able to find meaning in the act of playing regardless of whether they win or lose. In Umamusume though, victory is a foregone conclusion. The goals the characters set at the start of the season are impossible for them not long after. It's this framing that allows this series that seems like a goofy show about horses to sit with another difficult point that doesn't get talked about a lot in sports media, but is very common in real life. Sometimes the things you set out to do just are not possible no matter how hard you try, and the only thing you can do is make peace with that. Each of these examples is a demonstration of a connecting theme about the importance of having fun as a way of making your work meaningful. It seems like such an obvious point that I stopped writing after a few hours to go ask my partner if she thought this was so obvious that I shouldn't proceed with the project. The fact that there's a video at all here should give you a hint as to what she said, because even if you do know all of this already, everybody, myself included, needs a reminder sometimes. Even in the process of writing this script, my mind started to wander over to questions like, is this video going to land? How many likes is it going to get? Did I peek at that amen break that I tucked into that Bridget video? None of those questions have anything to do with the process of making it or enjoying the act of creating something. They're all focused on outcomes. And you might be shocked to learn that we live in an outcome-focused world. We might even be at the most outcome-focused point in history right here, right now, and it's probably gonna get worse before it gets better. No matter what you do, there is some way to monetize it, from your hobbies all the way to your sleep cycle. And if you have no interest in monetization, there are metrics for that. And if you don't care about the metrics, well, you're kinda SOL. They're basically unavoidable at this point. Whether at work or at play, we are aggressively pushed to focus on outcomes as the primary means of creating value. Ironically, having so many available metrics and outcomes means that we are also going to miss the mark more now than ever before. We are living in the age of failure. In the blur of day-to-day life where our time and attention can feel so finite, it's hard to stop and take the time to ask the simple question, am I actually enjoying this? Personally, I don't think I'm that good at it, but I do think it's important. If self-compassion and being kind to ourselves is important for dealing with setbacks when they happen, having fun helps us stay motivated to keep going. One cushions the fall, the other helps us get back up again. As hard as it can be to take the time to step back and reevaluate what we're getting out of our daily lives, the consequences of not doing it are easy to see. I'm sure you can think of a few creators here on YouTube or streamers on another site that keep producing things that they themselves have lost interest in because it helps keep their metrics up. If you aren't finding value in the act of doing something, well, that sounds an awful lot like a job. And worse, it sounds like a pretty miserable job. I don't know how this video will do, but I do know that I had a lot of fun making it, and maybe that's more important in the long run. Like that Deep Space Nine episode where they play baseball against a team they never had a chance of beating, but they still enjoyed the game. Hey, it was in the thumbnail. I had to mention it eventually.
Death to the opposition!
Going forward, I'm going to try to take time to evaluate the things that I'm doing, and if I can, stop if I'm not actually enjoying them. Maybe I'll just go do something else until I feel like coming back to it, and maybe sometimes I won't. One day, I will probably realize that I'm not enjoying making videos anymore, or maybe streaming just isn't fun. And if that's the case, well, there just aren't enough hours in the day to do things that I don't enjoy. Well, that's what I've got for this time, so until next video, have fun and be nice to yourself.